Week 12 of the college football season is here. Conference championship weekend is approaching. College football playoff season is approaching. But before all of that, we have a great Week 12 slate to talk about. If you are not subscribed already, please do so. Costs absolutely nothing, helps us out a ton. And make sure to go check out all of our other social medias. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, at Outlook Sports. I would appreciate it very much. Let's get into it. We got pretty much all of the marquee games for the week. Let's start off on a Friday night under the lights. Clemson going to Louisville. Louisville, a 3.5-point favorite coming off the OT loss versus Cal, where they're a 20-point underdog. And Clemson coming off the win versus FSU. What I'm very interested to watch in this game is Avion Terrell versus Chris Bell. Potentially 2 first-round NFL draft picks. Avion Terrell, obviously the cornerback for Clemson, who is the brother of A.J. Terrell, the Star Falcons cornerback, versus Chris Bell, who we all just watched torch Miami. He's been towards the top of a lot of the mock draft boards. This is going to be fascinating. I cannot wait to watch that matchup. Also, the Clemson defensive line, T.J. Parker and Peter Woods versus Isaac Brown in the Louisville offensive line. Those are 2 of the matchups that I think are really going to decide this game. Now, if we're going into the predictions, which we love to do that here, I think this turns into a game where Clemson, it looks like Clemson's going to win. They're playing really well on offense, and I think they just run out of gas offensively. I think Louisville keeps up the whole way, and I think they win a shootout. Maybe towards the end of the game, that Clemson D-line isn't humming quite as loud anymore. And I think Louisville wins a shootout 36-30 in an absolute Friday night thriller. Louisville gets it done. Let's move on. And they're still very much in the thick of the ACC race, the craziest conference in college football. It's no longer the Big 12. It is now the ACC. Let's move on, though. Saturday, 12 o'clock, USF at Navy. USF's a 10.5-point favorite on the road. Now, I think USF has the best roster in the American Conference in terms of, the athletes and the skill. But you will not find a team who's more comfortable with their identity than Navy. Now, obviously, I'm not going to pick them if Blake Horvath does not play. He was a game-time decision last week versus Notre Dame, and he did not play. So I'm assuming he'll play this week. From what I've heard and from what I've seen, he's going to play. Now, USF is 24th in the country in run D. Now, obviously, Navy is not the conventional, lineup in I formation and run the ball up the middle. So that's not, easily comparable. But that is still the strength of the USF defense is the strength of the Navy offense. So I don't love that. But just historically, which they've only had 5 or 6 games, but USF really struggles against Navy. They won last year, or no, they got killed last year. They won the year before that. I think this game is really close and uncomfortable for USF. I think they win on a last-second field goal, a last-second touchdown. So I'm going to take Navy to cover. And I'm going to trust Navy to keep it close at home. The final score, 37-34. USF wins a nail-biter. Moving on to Michigan at Northwestern. Northwestern, a 12.5-point underdog at Wrigley Field. Now, hear me out with this one. This game reminds me a lot of the Georgia at Mississippi State game a week ago, where you have the underdog who's been really frisky against good teams like Northwestern against USC, against Nebraska, Penn State, if you consider them a good team. And then you have the ranked powerhouse who's been playing a lot of close games this year in Michigan, like Georgia. They played a close game against Purdue, close game kind of against Michigan State. Anyway, and now you have the line, which is moving in more points for the home underdog, which I know, again, it's not really home. But I love to be on the opposite side of that. I was on the opposite side of it a week ago, even though I don't ever like to bet on my favorite teams. I bet on Georgia last week, and it worked with no sweat. So I love Michigan here. It is kind of scary because you look at the USC game, which is a completely different game without the Mayava forced fumble. So I understand that, and also I think every college football fan wants Michigan to have 2 losses going into the Ohio State game. It would just be so good for the sport, man. It would be so good for the sport. This seems like a spot where Michigan just blows them out because they've both been playing a lot of close games. And I think this is the spot where they get right with a far better roster. Final score, Michigan 23, Northwestern 9. They just cover, so I know it's not really quite the blowout I was just describing, but they get the job done and they cover the points, which they've had a hard time of doing all year. Let's move on. Notre Dame at Pitt. Now, this is not a must-win game by Pat Narduzzi standards. Let's roll the clip.
Do you feel like this is a must-win for this team when it comes to something?
Absolutely not. It is not an ACC game. I'm glad you brought that up. It's not an ACC game. I gladly get beat 103 or 110 to 10 in that game. They can put 100 up on us as long as we win the next 2 after that. But again, our focus is on Notre Dame and getting as many wins as we can.
But I would think if you're on the Pitt sideline, you're going to want to win this game. If you just heard the committee of the college football playoff chair say, yo, the ACC has no out-of-conference wins besides Miami. A day later, Pat Narduzzi saying, I don't care if we lose by 100. I don't even know what to say. I cannot imagine being a player going into this game, I guess it's not the most important game of the season, but like the most exciting game of your season. And your head coach is saying, I don't really give a shit if we lose by 100. As long as we beat Georgia Tech, that'll get us in. Just ridiculous, honestly. But let's get into the actual game. Because Pitt's been very exciting. They've won 5 straight since putting in true freshman quarterback Mason Heinschel. He's been awesome. This offense has not been the typical Pitt offense, run the ball down your throat. No, this offense has been consistent, explosive, actually has not been good at all at running the football. Now, they're top 5 in the country in rush defense. How much of that is because they allowed minus 10 rushing yards versus Stanford? One thing we know is we're going to find out versus Notre Dame. They will test your run defense again and again and again and again and again. Now, I don't really trust this Pitt defense. Their 2 best games came against Stanford and Boston College. Now, no disrespect, but those are not even close to the caliber of Notre Dame. I just think this is the spot where Pitt comes out the gates. They come out firing, but they just get overwhelmed by the talent ultimately on the Notre Dame sideline. I think it's exciting in the first half, and I think Notre Dame pulls away in the second half where it kind of ends in a blowout. Final score, Notre Dame 45, Pitt 24. In an exciting game, but ultimately one that's not really close in the end. Let's move on. 3:30, Iowa's going to Southern California, where the rain just follows them around, man. Isn't this awesome? 90% chance of rain in Southern Cal. This is essentially going to be a repeat of the Oregon game, but about 20 degrees warmer. So hilarious. Wherever Iowa goes, the bad weather follows. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, Southern California is going to have to run the ball in the rain against Iowa? I don't like that. Well, all those people must have forgot about the Michigan game. I did not. This is in the same stadium where that Michigan game was played, where they spanked them, where they knocked them around. Like, I'm more than comfortable with this team having to run the ball to win, because they did that against Michigan, who was not who was not Iowa. Okay? So, that being said, I think USC, well, one, they're great at home. Iowa has to be just deflated after getting knocked out of the playoffs, or getting knocked out of the playoff hunt last week. USC's great at home. I think they win big at home. I don't think this is ever a game. I think they win 34-13. Big win at home. And they are very much alive, which this sets up a huge game at Oregon, which is ultimately going to decide who gets that last playoff spot for the Big Ten. Now, let's move on. Another 3:30 banger. Oklahoma, number 11 Oklahoma, traveling to Tuscaloosa to play number 4 Alabama. This line is minus 5.5, open to Alabama minus 6.5. It's gone down a point. OU coming off the bye, coming off the electric win at Tennessee. This is very interesting, right? Because you have the elite run defense versus the horrible rushing offense. So it's like, does it really matter if Alabama doesn't run the ball anyway? And it's like, the load of this offense has been on Ty Simpson's shoulders all year. So that's going to be the case in this game. If Oklahoma can finally make this kid have a bad game, that's their only path, which it's like, that's been the key to every opposing team against Alabama. Can you make Ty Simpson have a bad game? No, has been the answer. So, Oklahoma, in my estimation of how they're going to win, they need to be able to stop the run with 4. They need to be able to get to the quarterback with 4. John Mateer needs to have his best game of the year. He needs to have a lot of carries. Xavier Robinson needs to have another 100-yard day. They need to get Isaiah Satenga the ball in space. Hey, Deion Burks, where have you been? Haven't seen you in a while. Can you make a surprise entrance? Those are the keys. Now, obviously, that feels like way too much for Oklahoma to have to do. I feel very comfortable in picking Alabama in this game. Unfortunately, like I've said, I'm a Georgia fan. I take no pleasure in this. But this, like, way too much needs to go right for OU. They need Mateer to play his best game. Xavier Robinson to have another 100 on the ground, their defense to make Ty Simpson have his worst game, and they need Satenga and Deion Burks to have huge impacts on this game. I think a few of those could happen. I don't see all 4 coming in a perfect storm in Tuscaloosa for Oklahoma to win this game. I don't see it. I unfortunately am very, very confident in this pick. I think Alabama wins by about 8 to 10 points. In a comfortable game. Alabama 31, Oklahoma 23. I know that's like a close game, but I think that it's not actually that close. That's just the final score, if that makes sense. Let's move on. Next up, what I think is the game of the week. Call me biased. Number 10, Texas, going between the hedges in prime time, 7:30 to play the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia a 6-point favorite. The line opened at 6.5. The hook has been removed. Let's get into it. Georgia, top 25 rushing offense in the country. Texas, probably the best rush defense in the country. Our seems to really be hitting his stride coming off his best 2 games. Has been good this year when he's been given time. His O-line obviously hasn't been great at giving him time this year. Besides the last 2 games, he's looked really good. Now, Georgia, can they get after the quarterback? The answer up to this point has been a resounding no. There's going to be problems if that continues, okay? But although they can't sack the quarterback at all, they've still been very good at stopping the run. I expect that to continue. I don't think Texas has ran the ball well all year. I don't think they just find it here in Athens against the Dogs. Now, Arch and Gunner are number 1 and 2 in the SEC in passes behind the line of scrimmage. You know, it makes sense. They recruit superior athletes who they trust with the ball in their hands. So this is going to be who can tackle better, who can prevent the screen passes for going for 15 yards or the slants to go for 30. You know, who can put a cap on these explosive plays that start behind the line of scrimmage. That's going to be absolutely massive. Now, I think Arch has a really good game here. I don't think that's a hot take. Every quarterback has had a good game against Georgia this year. One thing I want to talk about real quick, I think Georgia deserves much more credit for the Mississippi State game. The amount of people I heard take Mississippi State in the upset this week, and then who were just dead silent after they got splattered. They got put on a t-shirt in Starkville, and no one wanted to talk about it. And all the people who picked Mississippi State to win, to cover, to do this, to do that, they get put on a t-shirt and everyone's silent. It's interesting. That's all I'm saying. It's interesting. With that being said, though, I have no confidence in us playing well on both sides of the ball for 4 quarters against Texas. Now, we haven't had to up to this point, but I think Texas comes out hot. I think Sark definitely has some stuff cooking off the bye, but it's a long game. And ultimately, I think Georgia will just find a way to win like they always do. I think that continues here, but I think Texas covers. Final score, Georgia 29, Texas 24 in a banger game. Now that wraps up our Week 11 picks and predictions. Please, like I said, Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section. I would love to talk to y'all down there. We'll be back for reactions and for picks and previews next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend.